Her sleeve slipped back as she poured my wine, and I saw the ladder of scars climbing her arm. I had stepped in from a long winter ride and the council and a dispute over a frozen river. Two villages on opposite banks had been salting the same stretch of ice for a generation, and now that the river had frozen further than living memory recorded, they were arguing over who owned the salt rights to ice that had not been ice in our grandfather's day. I had ridden out at dawn with 8 men and ridden back at noon with a writ that satisfied neither village and that both villages would obey because I had set my seal to it. It is the work of a king. It is the work I had been doing for 9 years. I was tired. I was not unhappy. A man who has been king for 9 years and has learned that he is not, in the end, going to be given a fated mate, that whatever silence the gods write into some men's chests will be written into his, does not call himself unhappy. He calls himself a king with work to do, and he does the work, and he tells himself that the silence is the price of the crown, and on most days the telling holds. The study at Heartbreak was the warmest room in the keep. The fire was banked. The wine was already on the side table. The maid pouring it was the same maid who had poured my wine on 1,000 winter afternoons, and I had never looked at her face. She had only ever been a small shape moving at the edge of the room. But the sleeve was loose at the wrist, and her hand was steady, and the candle on the side table threw the light up under the linen as she lifted the pitcher. The cuff fell back to the elbow, and there on the inside of her forearm, pale and old and new and pale again, was a record of what had been done to her. A burned circle near the wrist, the size of the bowl of a kettle spoon. A long, thin line at the inside of the elbow, the kind a riding crop makes when it is brought down with the full force of a shoulder. A row of small punctures, 4 of them, set in a curve. I had seen that curve before. It was the curve of the brass tips on my Luna's evening slipper. And above the curve, fainter, the shape of a buckle. The girl set the wine carefully on the table without spilling a drop. She felt my eyes. She knew. Her hand went to the cuff and pulled it down over the scars, and she lowered her head and she curtsied, and she stepped back and she did not look up. She was already at the door when I found my voice. "What is your name?" "Wren, sire." "Wren what?" "Just Wren, sire." She would not raise her eyes. She would not raise them, I understood, not because she was afraid of me, but because she had been taught for so long not to look up that she could not have done it if she wished to. I let her go. I did not know yet what I would do with what I had seen. I only knew that the room was still and the wine was on the table, and a maid I had never looked at had walked out my study door with 9 years of someone else's cruelty written on her arm. I stood at the window for a long time. The sea below Heartbreak was black and the cliffs were white and the gulls were riding the wind. I did not move. Something in me was moving, though, slowly, the way a great ship turns in a harbor. I rang for the head steward. Heartbreak was a stiff man, gentle in private, careful in public. He had served my father and he had served me, and he had stood through every council meeting and every audit and every dispatch like a stone in a stream. When he came in, he glanced once at the wine on the side table, glanced once at me, and went still. "Sire." "The maid who just left this room." "Yes, sire." "Tell me everything about her." Heartbreak is a man who knows how to stall while he thinks. He folded his hands behind his back, and he tipped his head down 1/2 an inch, and he said, "Wren has served the household for some years, sire." "How many years?" "9, sire." "Where was she before?" "She came to us from the line of pack girls offered for service at the Moonlight, the year after your Highness's crowning." "Whose household does she serve?" He did not answer. "Heartbreak." "Lady Sale's, sire, her personal household." The fire moved. A log fell. I did not turn. "Whose decision was that?" "Lady Sale's, sire." "Why?" "I do not know, sire." "Heartbreak, look at me." "Why?" He looked at me, He was an old steward who had loved my father. He had taught me how to write a writ when I was 12, and he had stood next to me at my crowning, and he had managed my house for 9 years. Because, sire, he said very slowly, at your highness's first moon rite as king, when the new pack girls were brought up to be presented, your wolf moved. You did not see it. You were on the steps and the rite was new to you, and Lady Sale was at your right hand, but I saw it. Your wolf moved. He stopped. He breathed. And Lady Sale saw it too. Toward whom? Toward a girl at the back of the line, sire. Wren. Yes, sire. I stood very still in front of my window with my hands behind my back and looked at the white cliffs. What did you see, Halric? Tell me exactly. He set his palms together at the small of his back. The line of new pack girls came up from the eastern gate, sire, 12 of them. They had walked the cliff road from Brittle Pine and Carrow and the small holdings under Ashen Reach. They were tired. They were carrying small bundles. They were brought up through the lower yard and lined along the south wall of the keep. The moonseer of the south tower walked the line. Then the moonseer of the north tower walked the line. Then they came to the steps and waited for the king to come down. Yes. You came down. You had been crowned only the season before. You were in the dark cloak with the wolf clasp. The torches were lit. Lady Sale was at your right in white with her steward at her own right. You came down the steps. You did not yet know that the king is meant to stop at the bottom step and let the moonseer present the line. You came down past the bottom step. You walked along the line. You stopped twice, once at the third girl because she was very young and you were checking her hands for the chilblain, and once at the 8th girl because she had a grey tan in your council and you wished to be courteous. You reached the back. There was one girl there standing slightly apart. She was looking at the ground. You did not stop. You walked on, and then he drew a long breath. Your shoulder turned. My shoulder. Your shoulder, sire. Your wolf was in your shoulder that night. I had served your father. I knew the look of a wolf in a shoulder. Your wolf turned 3 points east toward the girl at the back of the line, and your boot turned with it for 1/2 step. You corrected. You walked on. You did not look back. I do not believe you knew you had done it. But Lady Sale, who was 8 feet behind you with her own steward, did know. She put her hand on her own steward's sleeve, and her steward looked at the girl, and the girl was marked then and there, before anyone else in the yard had noticed. What did Sale say to her steward? I was too far to hear, sire. I saw the steward nod once. The next morning a request came through the household offices for the small one at the back of the moon right line. The household offices put her on the duty roll. I signed it. You signed it. I signed it, sire. And I have lived with the signing for 9 years. Halric. Sire. You did not know what would come. I did not, sire. But I knew that a Luna does not ask for a kitchen girl from a moon right line by accident. I knew, and I did not refuse. I am old and I am very sorry, sire. You knew 9 years ago that you had signed something you should not have. Yes, sire. And you said nothing in 9 years. I told myself, sire, that I had not seen what I had seen. I told myself the shoulder had not turned. I told myself the lady's request was a kindness to an orphan. I told myself many things. I am the head steward of a great house, and I have spent 9 years telling myself many things. I will take whatever penalty your highness sets. I will take dismissal. I will take the road. You will take neither, I said. You will stay in your office. You will help me set this right. You will then, in your own time, write what you saw at that moon right in your own hand, and you will sign it, and it will go into the household record, so that no head steward who comes after you ever signs such a request again. Sire. You did not raise a hand to her, Halric. No, sire, I only signed. The signing is the larger sin. You will live with it, so will I. He bowed his head. You said you had heard things you had not seen. Yes, sire. What have you heard? That the lady disciplines the girl with her own hand when she is displeased. What displeases her? He looked at me for a long moment. Sire, he said, it displeases her when your eye passes over the girl by accident. I sent Halric out. I did not trust my own voice for what came next. 9 years, 9 winters, 9 councils, 9 moon rites, 9 state audiences, 9 pairs of seasons, 9 years of waking up next to a woman I had married for the Southern Alliance and feeling nothing where the book said a fated bond should sit. 9 years of telling myself that some kings are not given mates. 9 years of building a kingdom around the silence in my own chest. And in those 9 years, in my own keep, in my own household, my fated mate had been carrying a pitcher of wine to my study door, and a woman wearing my crown had been making sure she never lifted her face. I did not call my wolf, I did not have to. The old animal had been pacing under my ribs for 9 years without knowing what for, and now it knew, and it was very quiet and very alert, and it was waiting for me to choose what to do with what I had just learned. I chose to go to the kitchens. Old Brenna had run the kitchens at Highreach since before I could stand. She was a great square woman with a face that had been kind for so long that the kindness had worn grooves into it. She turned from the bread when I came in. I had not been in the kitchens except for ceremonial visits in years. The girls froze. The undercook dropped a spoon. "Sire," Brenna said, and she came around the long table and she stopped about 3 feet from me, because she could see my face, and she had known me from the cradle, and she did not need a steward to translate. "Brenna, walk with me." I took her along the back passage, the cold one where the herb pantry opens off the corner. I stopped at the pantry. I closed the door behind us. The herbs hung from the beams and the air was full of rosemary and old apples and the dry bite of the smoked salt. "Brenna," I said, "I am going to ask you a question and I want you to forget who I am." "I cannot forget who you are, sire." "Try." She set her broad hands on her hips. "The maid called Wren," I said. Brenna shut her eyes. "How long has she been beaten?" Brenna kept her eyes shut. "Brenna." 9 years, sire." "Who?" "You know who, sire." "Say it." "My lady, the Luna, her own hand mostly, sometimes one of her women, sometimes once or twice that I knew of one of her guard." "How often?" "Not every day, not even every month. When the lady is displeased, she is not always displeased." "What displeases her?" Brenna opened her eyes. "Sire," she said, very quietly, with respect, "the same thing that displeases any woman who has not got the man she married." I had to look at the wall for a moment. "Tell me one time," I said, "just one, so I know what I am dealing with." She looked at me, decided I meant it, looked at her hands. 3 winters ago, sire, the lady gave a hunt feast for the southern envoys. Wren was bringing up a tray of cold pheasant from the kitchen to the high table. You came in through the south door because you had been at the kennels and you were late, and you brushed past her in the corridor, and you nodded to her, not to her, to the tray, to keep her steady, the way a man nods to a servant carrying a heavy thing not to make her drop it. The lady saw the nod. After the feast, after the envoys had gone to bed, the lady kept her in the corner of her wing for 3 hours. Wren came down to me at second watch. I bandaged her in this pantry. She did not weep. She has never wept in front of me, sire. She apologized. She apologized for being slow to come down. She did not want me to be tired the next morning at the bread. I did not say anything. "Another time," Brenna went on, because she had begun and she would finish, 2 summers ago, you were giving an audience in the small hall. Wren had been sent up to clear the cups. You looked up when she came in because the door creaked. You did not look at her. You looked at the door. The lady was at the wall. She saw it. After, there was a buckle that time." "A buckle?" "A belt buckle, sire, on her back. She has it still, below the left shoulder." I closed my eyes. "There are others," Brenna said. "I will not say them all, you know enough." "Yes, sire. Yes." "Will you let me ask one question?" Ask, what are you going to do? I opened my eyes. The herbs on the beam above us moved very slightly in the draft from the door. I am going to set it right. As much as it can be set. With respect, sire, 9 years cannot be set right. No, but what comes after them can be. She looked at me for a long time. Then she nodded, once, the way kitchen mothers nod at men who have not been in their kitchens for years but who have, at last, come down to ask a question they should have asked long ago. You bandaged her. In the dark, sire, in this pantry, other women too, we have an arrangement. The first one to find her brings her here. The ladies' women do not come this far back. Who? Sire. Who has helped you, names. She hesitated. I saw her weighing whether to give me names that had stayed safe by being unspoken. I saw her decide. Myself, of course, Edda the herbwife, Margaret the laundress who has the back arches. Old Ven the night porter, who walks her down from the ladies' wing on the nights she is set out into the corridor. Captain Doran, twice, who carried her down himself when she could not walk. The smith's wife, who has kept salve. The kettle girl, who is 12 and who has never asked a question. She only stands in the doorway when Wren is in the pantry, so that no one comes in by accident. A 12-year-old child stands watch. She does it of her own will, sire. We did not ask her. She started it one night when she was 9, and we let her continue, because she would have done it whether we let her or not. I had to put my hand on the doorframe for a moment. You did not come to me, I said. Sire. Who comes to a king and says your wife beats your maid? Who comes to a lichen and says your Luna has hidden your true mate from you? Who lives after that if she is wrong, and if she is right? She drew a long breath. We are a kitchen, sire. We did what a kitchen could do. We were not enough. I stood in the pantry that smelled of rosemary and salt, and listened to a kitchen mother tell me that she had been bandaging my faded mate in the dark of my own keep for 9 years. Brenna, I said. Sire. Where is the captain of my guard? Doran was in the lower courtyard inspecting the change of watch. He was a hard man and a good one. He had not lied to me about a battle in 15 years. When I sent for him to come to the empty hawk mews where I had walked from the kitchens, he came at once. He saw my face. He set his helm under his arm. He went down on one knee. Stand up, I said. I do not want a soldier, I want a man. He stood. Did you ever lift your hand to the maid called Wren? No, sire. Did you ever know an order, given in the Luna's name, that another did? His jaw worked. He looked at the empty perches. Yes, sire. Whose? Sergeant Vale twice, a bondsman of the lady's bodyguard once. The lady herself many times, but those orders did not come through the guard. Those were done in her wing. You knew. I knew, sire. And you did nothing. I did what I could. The lady gave me a standing order 3 years ago to send any of my men she requested to her wing for discipline of servants. She named the girl Wren 3 times by name. I sent her men who would not obey, sire. Men who came back to me and said they had stood at the door and refused. I bore the cost of that with the lady's steward in coin, in standing, in 2 demotions of men who deserved better. I never sent her a man who would lift a hand to the girl. But I did not bring it to your highness. That is my failure, and I will take what comes for it. I looked at him for a long time. I am not a fool. I knew what it had cost him to bear the lady's steward and her purse for 3 years to protect a kitchen maid he had probably never spoken to. Doran. Sire. The men you demoted. Reinstate them tonight, with their back pay, and add a year to it from my own purse. Sire. And come to the great hall at dusk. Yes, sire. And Doran. Sire. The next time you stand at a door and refuse, you come to me. I do not care if I am at the council. I do not care if I am at supper. You come to me. Yes, sire. I walked back through the household with new eyes. I had walked these corridors 10,000 times. I had not seen them. I saw the undermaids close around a small figure when a footstep came down the gallery from the ladies' wing. I saw the way a kettle girl set her hand under Wren's elbow to steady her without looking at her. I saw an old groom in the bailey lift his cap to her very quickly as she passed under the arch with a basket, a gesture so small that no one but a wolf would have read it, and then I read it. He was honoring her. I saw on the inside of a doorframe at the bottom of the back stair a small mark cut into the wood with a knife, a wolf's paw the size of my thumbnail, carved by some hand that wanted her to know every time she passed under it that someone had not forgotten her. I did not know who had carved it. I never asked. But I touched it lightly in passing, and I thought, this household has been holding her up. I saw in the long gallery the old portrait of my mother that had been rehung 3 years ago after the great cleaning. The lady had directed the rehanging. She had hung my mother's portrait at a height that meant a tall person looking up at it would not see the eyes. I had thought at the time that it was a curious height. I had not thought further. Now I saw it. My mother had been a small woman, and her portrait sat the height of a small woman's gaze, and the lady had hung it where my eyes would pass over my mother's eyes without meeting them. I looked at my mother now. I looked her in the eye. I said quietly, "I am sorry I did not see." I saw in the south corridor where the council chambers open a small bench under the window. I had passed that bench 10,000 times. I had never wondered who sat on it. The bench had a worn place, the size of a small body, where someone small had sat. The someone small had sat there waiting to be called to come and clean, waiting to be summoned, waiting on a bench at the king's own south corridor, where the king's own boots had walked past for 9 years without ever once stopping to ask whose worn place the worn place was. It had not been able to lift her free, but it had not let her fall. I went to find her. She was in the herb pantry again. I do not know whether Brenna had sent her there or whether she had gone there herself, because it was the room in the house where she had learned to take a breath. She was sitting on the low stool by the rosemary bundle. Her hands were folded in her lap. She was looking at the door. Her shoulders were braced. I stopped in the doorway, and I saw what I had not seen at the wine table. She thought this was a test. She thought I had been told something, and that I had come down here to confirm it, and that she was about to be given to a worse house, or sent down the cliff road in the dark, or simply put out into the wind. She had braced herself for it the way a small animal braces for a storm, by going very still and very quiet and waiting for the wind to do whatever the wind was going to do. "Wren," I said. "Sire, will you allow me to come in?" She blinked. Nobody had ever asked her permission to enter a room she was in. "Yes, sire." I came in. I closed the door, then opened it again 4 inches. I did not want her in a closed room with me without a way out. She watched the door swing back, and something in her shoulders eased a degree. I did not sit on the stool next to her. I went down on one knee on the cold flagstone in front of her, the way I had gone down at my own crowning, and I looked at her face for the first time in 9 years. She was 28. There was gray at her temple already on one side. She had a small, fine bone over the eyebrow and a careful mouth and dark, watchful eyes. The skin under her right eye was a faint old brown. Her hands in her lap had 2 scars across the knuckles and a fresh one along the side of her left palm. She did not look like a maid. She looked like a woman who had been carrying something for 9 years. "Wren," I said, "I am not asking as your king. I am asking as a man who has done you a great wrong by not seeing. Will you sit with me a moment?" "I am sitting, sire." "Will you let me ask you some questions?" "Yes, sire." "You do not have to answer them. If a question hurts to answer, you may say so, and I will move to the next." She looked at me. "That is not how questions work, sire. It is how mine will work today." She put her hands flat on her knees. "All right. Do you remember the moon right when you were 19? It was the question I knew would tell me. I had wanted to ask anything else first, but everything else had grown out of that night, and I had to begin at the root. She looked at the rosemary on the beam. She did not blink. She did not move. "Yes," she said. "Tell me what you remember." I was at the back of the line. We were new pack girls being offered for household service. I had no family. I had been raised by the Monsieur's wife at Brittlepine until she died, and then she had no household to leave me to, and I was sent to the right. I was 19. I had been told to keep my eyes down. I kept them down. "The Monsieur's wife, tell me about her." She lifted her eyes a fraction, surprised that I had asked. "Her name was Marin. She was small. She had a gray tan at the old Brittlepine Wolf School who left her a house when she died, with a kitchen and a back garden and a wash line. Her husband was the Monsieur at the Brittlepine Chapel, and he was gentle, and he was deaf in one ear from a fall when he was a boy. They could not have children. They took me in when I was 3. I had been in a cradle on the steps of the chapel. Marin had gone out to take in the wash." "You were the foundling on the chapel steps." "Yes." "How did Marin die?" "In the second winter of the long frost, the year I was 18, a lung sickness. She lay 6 days. I was with her every hour of it. She held my hand at the end. She said," Wren paused, she said, "You will be loved, little Wren, by someone who knows what you are." I did not know what she meant. I did not ask. I sat with her until the breath went. "And her husband?" "Followed her 2 months. He did not eat. He sat in the chapel. He died in his sleep on a cold morning. I found him." "Then you were sent to the right." "The chapel had no warden. The Brittlepine elders took the house. They had no use for me. They sent me to the right. I walked the cliff road in the snow. 3 days. I had a small bundle. I had Marin's apron and her husband's woolen cap and a wooden spoon she had given me when I was 6. I have them still. They are in a box in the underpantry. The lady has not found them." "Wren." "Yes." "I am glad you have them." She looked at me, really looked for one moment, and then she looked back down at her hands, and I saw a small, slow movement at the corner of her mouth that was not quite a smile, but was the shape a smile would make if a smile could come. "But when we walked past the steps," she said, returning to the question, "I felt something. I had no word for it. I thought it was the torchlight, or the cold, or the wind off the cliffs." "What did it feel like?" "Sire." "Wren, what did it feel like?" She looked at her hands. "Like the inside of my chest had a door in it, and the door opened just for a moment, and there was something on the other side. Then we walked past the steps, and a woman came down to me afterward, and the next morning I was sent to her wing. I thought it was an honor. I thought the door had been the door of an honor." "What did the woman say to you, in the yard?" Lady Sale came down the steps very quickly. She said, "You will come with me." I did not know who she was. I thought she was one of the matrons of the household offices. I followed her up into the keep. She walked me to a small chamber off her wing and shut the door and sat down across from me and looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "Do you know what you are?" I said, "I am Wren, my lady, from Brittlepine." She said, "You are nothing. You are nothing at all. You are a kitchen girl with the wrong face. If you ever lift your eyes in this household, I will see to it that you never lift them again. Do you understand me?" I said yes. She said it the way a woman says something she has practiced not saying. She put me in a washroom with 2 of her women that night. They cut my hair, which had been long. They gave me gray wool. They took the bundle from me, the apron, the cap, the spoon, and the youngest of them, who was kinder than the others, came to me 3 nights later and gave it back in secret, and told me to hide it where no one would look. I hid it in the underpantry under a flagstone. I have not opened it in 9 years. I know it is still there because once a year I go down and put my hand on the flagstone. I felt the inside of my chest do something it had not done in 9 years. The dull ache I had carried since my crowning. The place where every book and every old wife and every Monsieur in the realm had told me, A faded bond should sit opened, and the silence I had been living inside opened with it. And on the other side of the silence was the sound of a woman in a herb pantry breathing. I have heard much music in my life. I have stood in the bell tower at Graythorne under the great winter peal, and I have heard the 7 Moonseer choirs sing the cold sun home in Terrowmere, and I have stood under the cliff organ at Highreach when the storm wind hits it just right. I have never heard a sound so clearly as I heard her draw a breath in that herb pantry. Wren, sire, did you ever feel that door again, after that night, in 9 years? It once went. Today, sire, when you came in for your wine. I did not touch her. I had decided in the doorway that I would not today. The body that had been used as a target for 9 years was not a body to be reached for without invitation. But I did move my hand to a place she could see. Wren, I am going to tell you what I know, and then I am going to ask you something. And then I am going to leave the room and you are going to think for as long as you need. Will you let me? Yes, sire. What you felt at the moon right was the mate bond. You and I are fated. Lady Sale saw my wolf move toward you when you walked past the steps that night. She had been my betrothed for 2 seasons and the Southern Alliance was already signed. The morning after the rite she asked the household to give her a small maid from the back of the line. She did not give a reason. She did not need to. She had been raised in a great house, and she knew that no one would refuse her a kitchen girl on the morning of a king's first moon rite. She was looking at her hands. I did not know, I said. I am not asking you to forgive that. I am telling you so that you know what was done. She made certain you stayed where she could see you, and she made certain that whenever I came near you by accident, you paid for it. She did not speak. Wren. Yes. I am going to set this right. She lifted her eyes finally. She did not lift them all the way. She lifted them as high as my collar. It was the highest she had lifted them in 9 years. Sire, with respect, you cannot set 9 years right. I sat back on my heel. You are correct, I said. I cannot, I will not pretend that I can. What I am going to do is small by what was owed to you, but I am going to do it, and then I am going to ask you a question. What are you going to do? I told her. When I had finished, she sat very still for a long while. Then she said, Sire. Yes. Do not do it for me. I am not. I am doing it because she did it. Whatever I have ever felt for her, and I have felt little, I cannot stand under the same roof with a woman who has done this. But I want you to know that I am not asking anything of you by doing it. You owe me nothing. She nodded just once. And the question? The question I will ask after, not now, not in this pantry. All right. I rose. At the door I turned. Wren. Sire. You did not imagine the door at the moon rite. It was a real door. She did not answer. She did not need to. I saw her swallow once, very carefully, the way one swallows when one has not believed something for 9 years and is suddenly afraid it might be true. I left the door of the pantry open behind me, 4 inches, the way I had found it. By dusk the household was in the great hall. I had sent Halric through every corridor in the keep and every workshop in the bailey, and he had brought them in. The kitchen women, the undermaids, the laundresses, the grooms, the kennel master, the falconer, the steward's clerks, the bodyguard, the council members in residence, the 4 Moonseers who lived in the South Tower, the 2 cooks, the herbwife, the smith's 2 apprentices, the night porter, the day porter, the gate warden and his 3 men. Every soul who lived under the roofs of Highreach. They lined the long walls. They did not know why they had been brought. They knew by my face that they were about to. The fire on the central hearth was high. I had ordered it built up. The torches were lit along the columns. Outside the high windows the sea was very dark and the wind was up. Lady Sale came in last. She came in as she always came in, very straight, the silver chain of her station at her throat, her steward at her right hand. She glanced down the line of household and read what no one had said and was, I will give her this, not surprised. Her face did not change. Only her hands changed slightly. She had been holding them folded. She unfolded them and let them hang. She had decided in the doorway not to flinch. I waited until she had reached the center of the hall. I did not let her come up to me at the high seat. I came down the steps, and I stood on the floor of the hall where she stood, and I spoke so that every soul present would hear. There is a woman in this household called Wren. I did not see Wren. I had not put her in the center of the hall. She was to one side near a stone column with Brenna standing close to her and the herbwife behind her. She had a place to lean and a place to be invisible if she chose. I had told Halric to give her that. I did not look at her now. I looked at Sale. For 9 years she has served in the household of my Luna. For 9 years she has been beaten in that household. With my Luna's own hand, and with the hands of women under my Luna's roof, and twice with the hand of a guardsman ordered to do it in my Luna's name. The marks of it are on her arms and on her back. The kitchens of this keep have been bandaging her in the dark for 9 years. The hall did not move. At my first moon, right as your king, 9 winters ago, when the new pack girls were brought up to be presented, my wolf moved toward a girl at the back of the line. I did not see it. I was new to my crown and I was wearing it badly. But Halric the head steward saw it, and Brenna the kitchen mother heard it told to her that night, and my Luna who stood at my right hand saw it most clearly of all. I let that sit a moment. The next morning my Luna asked the household for that girl as a maid in her wing. There was no reason given. None was required. None was questioned. The girl was 19. She was an orphan from Brittlepine. She had no family to ask after her. She was placed in my Luna's household and she was kept there, and for 9 years whenever my eye passed over her by accident she paid for it in her own skin. A sound in the hall, a small one. One of the kitchen women had begun to weep. I name this. I name it before the household so that no one in this house will ever say after tonight that no one knew and no one had the standing to speak. I knew nothing. I was not asked. I was kept from the knowing. That is the sin done to me. The sin done to her is worse and I cannot set it right. I can only do what the old law tells me to do when a Luna has knowingly and continually harmed her king's fated mate. I turned to Sale. She had gone the color of old paper, but her eyes were steady. Sale Vendel, I said, by the old wolf law of this hold and of the 4 packs of the North Pine, a Luna who has knowingly harmed her king's true mate forfeits her name, her title, and her place in the pack. She lifted her chin. Sire, she said, her voice was quite level, may I speak? I had not expected her to ask. I had expected her to be silent or to cry. I had not expected the great house schooling to hold this far into the moment. You may speak, once, and then I will speak and then it will be over. She nodded. I will not deny what I did. I knew what I had seen at the moonlight. I knew what your shoulder had done. I had been your betrothed for 2 seasons, and the Southern Alliance had been signed, and a Luna who has been promised to a king does not stand in a torchlit yard and watch her king's wolf turn toward a kitchen girl from Brittlepine and do nothing. I did what any Luna in this hall would have done. I removed the danger. I gave you 9 good years of an alliance that has kept your southern border from war, and I gave them to you in the only way they could be given. I will not stand here and pretend to a remorse I do not feel. I defended what was mine. The hall did not move. And the beatings, I said. Her jaw tightened. She did not answer at once. I would not have needed to discipline her, she said, if you had not kept looking at her by accident. It was the cruelest thing she could have said, and she said it with her chin up and a great lady's diction and the silver chain of her station still at her throat. It was the last great house line she had left. She knew it was. She said it anyway. I let it sit. I let it sit because I wanted the hall to hear it, and I wanted Wren, against her stone column, to hear it, and I wanted Sail herself to hear it after it had left her mouth, in the silence of 300 people who had heard it with her. I let it sit until the silence had done its work. Then I said, very quietly, "What was yours was a marriage I made in good faith for an alliance. What was not yours, and what was never yours, was the kitchen girl from Brittlepine. You did not remove a danger. You removed my mate. You knew the difference, and you have spent 9 years making certain I did not learn it." I let that sit too. I name this. I name it before the household so that no one in this house will ever say after tonight that no one knew and no one had the standing to speak. I knew nothing. I was not asked. I was kept from the knowing. That is the sin done to me. The sin done to her is worse, and I cannot set it right. I can only do what the old law tells me to do when a Luna has knowingly and continually harmed her king's fated mate. A sound in the hall, a small one. One of the kitchen women had begun to weep. By the old wolf law of this hold and of the 4 packs of the North Pine, I strip you of the name of Luna of Hyrich. I strip you of your seat at this hearth. I strip you of every right and revenue you held by virtue of standing at my right hand. By the same old law, I do not put a woman to the sword for the keeping of a household. I am not my father, and I am not the kind of king who cleans a hall with a blade. You will live. She drew a breath. She had thought, I think, for one moment that I might not let her. You will not be returned to your southern pack, who would receive you kindly and tell themselves a story about how I wronged you. You will go east to the holding at Brackmore, which is empty since the old baron's death, and you will live there as a baroness in her widow's right, on a baroness's allowance, no more and no less. You will not be permitted within 50 miles of Hyrich in my lifetime. You will not be permitted at any moon right of the 4 packs in my lifetime. You will live to know, every day of your life, what you had to do to a young woman to keep a man you never had. I felt my wolf then. I had kept it under all afternoon. I had spoken to a steward and a kitchen mother and a captain of the guard and a fated mate I had not seen, and I had kept the animal in me very still and very quiet and very alert because what wanted to come out of me would not have helped any of them. It would have terrified Wren in the pantry. It would have given Doran the wrong order to obey. It would have made Brenna afraid to speak. It would have done none of them any good. But now, in front of the woman who had hidden my mate from me for 9 years and beaten her in the dark of my own house, now, with the household standing along the walls and the torches burning, and the fire on the hearth high and the sea outside the windows beating the cliffs, the way the sea has been beating the cliffs since before the 4 packs had a name, now my wolf came up out of me, and I let it come. I did not move. I did not raise a hand. I did not raise my voice. The torches gutted. The fire on the hearth flattened, then climbed. The hounds in the lower yard began to howl. The horses in the stables, behind 2 stone walls in a courtyard, began to scream. The wolves out in the hills, 3 miles down the cliff road, began to answer the hounds. Sail, who had lived 9 years next to me without ever once feeling what a king's fated bond feels like when it is in the room, who had stolen the bond, and never known the price of having it, felt it now, for the first time, from the wrong side of it. She felt what was missing. She felt what had been taken not from me but from herself, by herself, when she chose to put a kitchen girl on her household roster 9 winters ago. Her composure did not break. She had been raised by a great house, and she had been schooled in not breaking. But the color of old paper went out of her face and the color of cold ash came in, and her hands, which had not flinched at any of my words, began to tremble at her sides. She did not let them shake. She made fists of them. The fists were very white. "Take her out," I said. Doran came down the hall with 4 men, and Sail, who had been the Luna of Hyrich an hour ago, turned and walked out of the hall under their escort. She did not look at Wren. She did not look at me. She kept her chin up. She had been a great lady before she was a small one, and she would keep what she had left. The hall stood in the silence she had walked through. I turned, finally, to the column, where Wren was standing with Brenna and the herbwife. I did not cross the hall to her. I had asked her in the herb pantry to let me leave a question. I had to ask the question still. I went up 2 steps of the dais so that the household could see, and so that she would not feel that I was bearing down on her. I spoke across the floor. "Wren of Brittle Pine." She lifted her head. She lifted it all the way. It was the first time I had seen her face in full light. Her gray at the temple and her careful mouth and her watchful dark eyes were the most beautiful arrangement of human features I had ever seen, and I do not say so as a faded man's boast. I say so as a record of fact. The hall saw it. There was a small intake of breath along the wall behind her. "Wren," I said, "I owe you everything in my house and in my body and in my hand, and I cannot give it back to you. I cannot give you the 9 years. I cannot give you the Monsieur's wife who raised you, who would have been alive to see this. I cannot give you the night I should have seen you at the moon right when I was a boy who had just had a crown put on him, and did not know yet how to look down a line of new pack girls and see his fate at the back of it." She did not speak. Her hands at her sides had unfolded slightly. She was listening. "I am not asking you to be my Luna. I am not asking you to step up from this column to this dais tonight. I am not asking you anything tonight that I have any right to ask. I am asking you only this, and I will ask it once, and you may say no, and I will live with the no, and nothing in your life will change because of the no except that you will be free and pensioned and given any house in this kingdom that you ask for, and the captain of my guard will see to your safety until the day you die. The question is." I came down the 2 steps. I did not cross the hall to her. I stopped halfway. I went down on one knee on the stone of my own great hall in front of every soul who lived under my roofs, and I held out my open hand, palm up, 4 feet of stone floor between her column and mine. "The question is, will you let me begin?" She looked at my hand. She looked at it for a long time. Brenna at her right did not move. The herbwife behind her did not move. The hall did not move. The fire on the hearth did not move. Then she came forward, 3 small careful steps, and she put her hand in my hand. The bond did not strike like a hammer. I have been told all my life that the fated bond, when it finally seats itself, strikes like a hammer, that it is a thunderclap, a flash of white through the bones, a roar in the wolf. I will say what mine was, and let other men keep their thunderclaps. It was a window opening in a room where the air had grown stale. It was the sound of her hand resting on my open palm, the smallest weight, the lightest pressure, and the silence in my chest, which I had carried for 9 years and which I had stopped expecting to be filled, going quiet in a different way. Not the dull silence of an absence, the held silence of a presence. Her hand was scarred at the knuckles. The little finger of her left hand did not straighten all the way. It had been broken once and set in the dark, and it had healed crooked. Her wrist under my thumb was very thin. The pulse in it was very fast. I did not close my fingers over hers. I let my hand stay open under her hand. She could lift her hand off mine any time she chose. She did not lift it. "I will let you begin," she said. The hall did not bow. I had told Halric before this hour that no one in the hall was to bow tonight when the moment came, because no one had earned the right yet to bow to her. They had all been part of 9 years of not seeing her. The hall was not to bow until she was named Luna. And she was not to be named Luna until she chose to be. So the hall did not bow. It did something else instead, which I did not order, and which Halric did not order, and which I think the household did of its own accord. The kitchen women, one by one, came forward and stood behind Wren. Brenna came first, of course, then the herbwife, then the undermaids in their gray wool, then the laundresses, 2 of them carrying baskets they had forgotten to set down, then the kettle girl, then the old groom who lifted his cap to her under the arch, then the night porter and the day porter together, then Captain Doran very quietly with his helm still under his arm, then the smith's 2 apprentices, the falconer with his thick gloves still on, the kennel master. They lined up behind her. They did not speak. They did not bow. They stood at her back where they had been at her back for 9 years in tiny invisible ways, and they let the household and the council and the moonseer see, in one long minute, who Wren had been to them and who they had been to her under 9 years of silence. The council members along the far wall saw it. The moonseers in their dark robes saw it. The bodyguards at the doors saw it. I knelt on the floor of my own great hall with her hand resting on my open palm and looked up at her, and I did not say anything at all, because she had already said the thing. "I will let you begin." Later, when the hall had been cleared, and the kitchens had been told to send up a tray of bread and broth and warm wine because no one had thought to feed her, and the herbwife had taken her arm gently and led her to a chair near the fire in my own study, I went and stood by the window. The sea was still beating the cliffs. The hounds in the lower yard had stopped howling. They had settled into a low keening, which is the sound hounds make when something in the keep is right that had been wrong for a long time. I had heard hounds keen like that only once before, when my father was on his deathbed, and the hounds at his door knew the next king was already in the room. I came back from the window. Brenna had set the tray on the low table by the chair. She had ladled the broth and broken the bread and was holding the cup of wine in her great square hand, and she was looking at Wren with the same look she had given me when I had skinned my knee at 4. Wren had her hands folded in her lap again, but the folding was different. It was the folding of a woman who did not yet quite believe. She was sitting in a chair near a fire in the king's own study, with a kitchen mother handing her bread. "Wren," Brenna said. "Yes, Brenna." "Take the cup." Wren took it. "Drink." Wren drank. Brenna nodded, looked at me, looked at Wren, said, "I will be in the kitchens, my dear. Send for me if you need me," and walked out as though she had been walking out of this study for 40 years instead of one night. I sat down on the low chair on the other side of the fire. I did not sit at the desk. I did not sit at any seat that put me higher than her. "Wren." "Yes." "May I ask one more question tonight?" "Yes." "Will you let me look at your arm?" She put the cup down on the tray. She turned her sleeve back herself all the way to the elbow. She did not hide. The candlelight on the side table, the same side table, the same candle, the same low table, threw the light up under the linen as it had thrown it that afternoon when I had not been looking, and now I was. I looked. I let myself look. I saw all of it. I did not touch. I said, "Wren." "Yes." "I am Aaron, not sire, not highness, just Aaron. If you can bear it." She did not laugh, because she had not learned yet how to laugh in a room with me. But she did smile, very small, very tired, the first smile I had ever seen on her face. It was the smile of a woman who has set down a load she had been told for 9 years she had to carry. "I can try. Try slow." "Yes." "Wren." "Yes." "If you do not want to be Luna of Hyrich, you will not be. There is no chain at this hearth that has to go on a particular throat. If you want a small house in the south where the winters are not so hard, I will give it to you. If you want a passage on the next ship to anywhere on the map, I will write the writ myself. If you want to stay in this keep without any title at all and live in the old solar with a window over the sea, the solar is yours from this hour. The only thing I will not give you is anything you have not asked for." She watched me a long time. "I do not know what I want," she said. "I have not been allowed to want anything in 9 years. I do not know how to begin." Then we begin with very small things. Bread, a chair near a fire, a door that opens 4 inches, a name without sire on the front of it. We will not name anything bigger than that tonight. "Yes." "And if you want, in a month or in a year, to ask for one of the bigger things, you will ask and I will give it. And if you want, in a month or in a year, to say that you do not want me at all, you will say it and I will hear it, and your house in the south will be ready. You will say all of this in a writ. I will say all of this in a writ. Halric will draft it before midnight. You will keep the seal of it under your hand, not under mine. Yes. I did not take her hand. I had taken it once already today, on the stone floor of my hall, and I had decided in the herb pantry that I would not reach for her again tonight. I put my open hand on the arm of the low chair where she was sitting, palm up, near her wrist, the way I had put it on the floor of the hall. She looked at my hand. After a long while she set her own hand, very lightly, over mine. I did not close my fingers. I let my hand stay open under her hand, the way it had been in the hall. In the candlelight, in the room where I had not seen her for 9 years, I sat at the foot of her chair and watched the trembling go out of her hand.